The Universal Institute's advanced xenobiology classroom was, without question, the most awkward place in the known universe. Not because of the strange alien architectures that made sitting comfortable for exactly nobody, and not because of the bizarre ventilation system that somehow managed to smell like wet socks, regardless of which atmospheric mixture it was pumping out. No, it was awkward because of the human. Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Fiona sat in the back corner, legs crossed, chin propped on her palm, looking for all the world like she belonged there. Which, according to the 43 other species represented in this classroom, she absolutely did not. The Velnari student, 3 seats over, had his gills fluttering nervously every time she so much as shifted in her chair. The crystalline being near the front kept rotating her faceted head to get a better look, light refracting off her surface in what could only be described as anxious sparkles. Even Mock, the reptilian who prided himself on being descended from apex predators, had strategically positioned himself as far from the human as the classroom's curved walls would allow. "Now then," Dr. Kinthva clicked, his mandibles creating that particular sound that meant business. "Today we will be conducting a rather unique practical examination." His compound eyes swept across the room, lingering just a moment longer on Fiona than the others. She didn't seem to notice, or care. She was doodling something that looked suspiciously like a stick figure riding what might have been a 6-legged horse, though with humans, you never could tell what passed for art. Professor Helnix chimed in with their crystalline voice, each word ringing like struck glass. "We have arranged for live specimens to be brought in. 3 juvenile Velthar from the Nexus Prime hunting reserves." The effect was immediate and spectacular. Jill, the gaseous being, quite literally dispersed in panic before quickly pulling herself back together. Grix's multiple limbs began that telltale defensive curl that his species employed when facing imminent death. Fenn's throat sac inflated to twice its normal size, which everyone knew meant she was either about to produce mating calls or have a complete nervous breakdown. "Velthar?" Vulka's silicon-based voice crackled like breaking stone. "But those are Class A predators." "Indeed," Dr. Chinthva said, with what might have been academic satisfaction if insects could feel such things. "We felt it was time for a more hands-on approach to understanding predator psychology." Fiona looked up from her doodle. "Oh, cool. How big are they?" The silence that followed could have been measured in geological epochs. Every eye, optical sensor, and heat-detecting organ in the room turned to stare at her. She blinked back with those peculiar human eyes that somehow managed to look both predatory and prey-like at the same time, which frankly was just confusing for everyone involved. "I beg your pardon?" Professor Helnix's form flickered slightly, which in their species indicated either deep thought or impending system failure. "The cubs," Fiona clarified, as if this was the most natural question in the universe. "How big are they? Like puppy-sized, or more like, I don't know, pony-sized?" "Puppy-sized." Mock's forked tongue flicked out nervously. "What manner of creature is a puppy?" "Oh, right," Fiona scratched behind her ear in that absent way humans did when they forgot they were the only species in the room. "Puppies are baby dogs. Dogs are, well, they're like small wolves, I guess. Domesticated pack hunters that humans keep as companions." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Or maybe that was just everyone's circulatory systems shutting down in collective horror. "You keep pack hunters as companions?" Fen whispered, her throat sac deflating to nearly nothing. "Well, yeah," Fiona shrugged. "They're great. Loyal, protective, excellent judges of character. My family had 3 when I was growing up. Max, Bella, and this old grumpy guy named Sergeant who could open doors and somehow always knew when someone was lying." Dr. Chinthva's antennae twitched rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his people. The Velthar cubs are approximately 2 meters at the shoulder, possess retractable claws that can pierce starship hull plating, and have been known to hunt in coordinated packs from birth. "So, pony-sized, then," Fiona nodded, making a note in her datapad. "Got it." The casual way she said it, like she was discussing the weather or the cafeteria's latest attempt at universal nutrition paste, made several students question whether humans had any concept of self-preservation whatsoever. Professor Helnix decided to try a different approach. "Fiona, you do understand that these creatures are extremely dangerous, correct? They are apex predators from a Class 9 death world. Their bite force exceeds that of most industrial equipment." "Uh-huh." Fiona was back to her doodle, now adding what appeared to be wings to her stick figure. "Sounds about right for cubs that size. Are they socialized at all, or are we talking full feral?" "Socialized?" Dr. Kinthva's mandibles clicked in rapid succession, the insectoid equivalent of a nervous breakdown. "They are predators. They do not socialize." "Everything socializes," Fiona said matter-of-factly, not looking up from her artwork. "It's just a question of how and with what. Pack hunters especially. They have to learn cooperation, hierarchy, communication. Basic stuff." "Basic stuff," Vulca repeated faintly, his rocky exterior beginning to show stress fractures. The door at the front of the classroom began to iris open, accompanied by what sounded like a combination of hydraulic systems and very large, very unhappy animals making very threatening noises. "Ah," Professor Helnix chimed with forced cheerfulness. "Here they come now." The other students began what could only be described as a stampede toward the walls. Some climbed. Others pressed themselves flat against surfaces. Jill dispersed again, and this time took considerably longer to reform. Fiona looked up from her doodle with mild interest. "Oh, good. I was getting bored." And that, as any decent narrator would tell you, was probably the most ominous thing anyone had said all day. What came through that door was not, by any reasonable definition, a cub. The first Velthar padded into the classroom with the kind of fluid grace that suggested it could go from standing still to tearing your face off in approximately 0.3 seconds. Its shoulders reached the 2-meter mark that Dr. Chinthva had mentioned, but somehow seeing it in person made those measurements seem woefully inadequate. Midnight black fur rippled over muscles that looked like they'd been carved from compressed steel. 6 legs moved in perfect synchronization, each paw the size of a dinner plate, and equipped with claws that gleamed like surgical instruments. Its head turned slowly, scanning the room with eyes that glowed like molten amber. When it opened its mouth to taste the air, it revealed teeth that belonged in a nightmare. "Oh, good Lord," Fen whispered, from where she'd somehow managed to stick herself to the ceiling using her species' natural adhesive properties. The second cub entered, slightly smaller than the first but somehow more menacing. Where the first moved with predatory confidence, this one moved with predatory calculation. Its head swiveled back and forth like a scanner, cataloging every student, every exit, every potential threat or meal. Which, let's be honest, in this classroom were pretty much the same thing. The third cub bounded in with what could only be described as youthful enthusiasm for violence. It was the smallest of the three, but that was like saying a tornado was smaller than a hurricane. It immediately began sniffing around the room's perimeter, following scent trails with the focused intensity of a creature born to hunt. "Magnificent specimens," Professor Helnix chimed, though their crystalline form was flickering more rapidly now. "Notice how they immediately begin establishing territorial awareness." The largest cub's head snapped toward Helnix at the sound, lips curling back to reveal even more teeth than seemed anatomically possible. A low rumble started in its chest, not quite a growl, but definitely not a purr. "Perhaps," Dr. Chinthva said quietly, his antennae now flat against his head, "we should maintain silence for optimal observation conditions." What followed was the kind of tense quiet usually reserved for diffusing explosives or waiting for biopsy results. The three cubs spread out across the classroom with military precision, forming what any tactical expert would recognize as a standard hunting triangle. They moved like liquid death, testing the air, examining corners, and generally making it clear that everything in this room existed entirely at their discretion. Mock, pressed so flat against the wall that he resembled a very nervous mural, watched in horrified fascination as the medium-sized cub approached his position. The creature's nostrils flared as it caught his scent, head tilting with the kind of curiosity that preceded either playing or eating. The cub took another step closer, then another. Mock's pupils dilated to pinpricks. His tail, which he'd wrapped around himself for protection, began to tremble. The cub, apparently finding this reaction interesting, moved even closer, now near enough that Mock could count individual whiskers. "Don't move," Grix whispered from his own wall-mounted position. "Predators respond to movement." The cub's ear twitched at the sound. Its amber gaze shifted from Mock to Grix, and that calculating intelligence behind its eyes was somehow worse than simple animal hunger would have been. Meanwhile, the smallest cub had finished its perimeter investigation and was now focused on something far more interesting: the gaseous form of Jill, who was currently compressed into the upper corner of the room like the universe's most terrified cloud. "It can't actually hurt me in this form," Jill whispered, her voice barely more than a vibration in the air. "Can it?" The cub stood on its hind legs, front paws against the wall, and began what could only be described as trying to catch her. Its claws scraped against the surface as it attempted to swipe at her dispersed particles. "Oh, fascinating," Professor Helnix couldn't help but comment. "It's trying to interact with non-corporeal matter. This suggests a level of curiosity that—" All three cubs stopped what they were doing and turned toward the professor. The largest one took a deliberate step in their direction, and the sound it made was definitely a growl this time. "Right," Helnix's voice dropped to barely audible. "Silence it is." The cubs resumed their investigation, and it quickly became apparent that they were working their way systematically through the room. Student by student, scent by scent, they were cataloging everyone present. And everyone present was having the same thought. When they got to the human, things were going to get very, very messy. Fiona, for her part, was still sitting in her chair, not pressed against a wall, not stuck to the ceiling, not dispersed into component particles, just sitting there, watching the cubs with the kind of attention most people reserved for mildly interesting documentaries. The largest cub finished intimidating Vulca, whose rocky exterior was now showing genuine cracks, and turned its attention toward the back corner of the room. Its nostrils flared as it caught a new scent. Its ears perked forward. Its tail, which had been lashing with predatory excitement, suddenly stilled. The creature's entire posture changed. Where before it had moved with the confident swagger of an apex predator, now it approached with something that looked almost like caution. Its head lowered slightly, not in submission, but in the way of a creature that had encountered something unexpected. "Oh, this is interesting," Fiona murmured, setting down her stylus. The cub froze at the sound of her voice, its amber eyes fixed on her with laser focus, and for a moment the entire room held its breath. Then the most extraordinary thing happened. The cub's tail began to wag. Now, when a Velthar's tail wags, it's not the happy, floppy motion of some harmless, domesticated creature. It's a deliberate, controlled movement that sends ripples through muscles designed for crushing bones. But there was something undeniably friendly about the way this particular tail was moving. "What in the name of all the void spawn is happening?" Mock breathed, his reptilian brain struggling to process what he was witnessing. The cub took another step toward Fiona, then another. Its massive paws made no sound on the classroom floor, which was somehow more terrifying than if they had thundered. But its body language was shifting by the second, from apex predator to something that looked suspiciously like a very large, very dangerous dog that had just spotted its favorite human. "Nobody move," Dr. Kinthava whispered, his compound eyes tracking every micro-movement of the approaching creature. Any sudden motion could trigger its hunting instincts. Fiona glanced at him with mild amusement. "Its hunting instincts aren't triggered. Look at its ears." Every student in the room who possessed eyes, optical sensors, or heat detection organs focused on the cub's ears. They were perked forward, alert, but not pinned back against its skull. In predator body language, this was significant. "And its hackles aren't raised," Fiona continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than analyzing a creature that could bite through starship plating. "Its breathing is steady, not that short panting you get when they're amped up for a kill. And see how its front paws are turned slightly outward? That's a relaxed stance." The cub was now close enough that Fiona could have reached out and touched its nose. It stopped just outside arm's length and sat down with all the dignity of a creature that had made a deliberate choice rather than responding to instinct. Then it did something that made every other species in the room question everything they thought they knew about the universe. It whined. Not a growl, not a snarl, not the kind of vocalization that preceded violence. A soft, almost musical whine that somehow conveyed both curiosity and what could only be described as hope. "Oh, you're a good boy, aren't you?" Fiona said, in a tone that was completely different from her usual casual drawl. It was warm, gentle, and carried an authority that seemed to resonate through the room. The effect on the cub was immediate. Its tail wagging increased in tempo, its ears perked even higher, and it scooted forward, just a little bit closer. "Fiona." Professor Helnix's voice was strained to its crystalline breaking point. "Please, be extremely careful. We don't understand what's happening here, but—" "I do," Fiona said simply, extending her hand toward the cub, palm up, fingers slightly curved. "He's checking me out, seeing if I'm pack or prey." The cub stretched its neck forward, nostrils flaring as it investigated her scent. Its nose was the size of Fiona's entire palm, and when it touched her hand, several students made small sounds of distress. But instead of teeth closing around her wrist, the cub simply sniffed thoroughly, then did something even more shocking. It licked her fingers. "Good boy," Fiona murmured, and the praise seemed to unlock something in the creature. It shuffled even closer, lowering its massive head until it was resting against her knees. The classroom erupted in whispered chaos. "This is impossible." Grix clicked frantically from his wall-mounted position. "Velthar don't form bonds with other species. They're apex predators. So are humans, Fiona said matter-of-factly, now scratching behind the cub's ears with the casual confidence of someone who had clearly done this before. We just went about it differently. Humans are apex predators? Vulca's rocky voice cracked, literally, small pebbles falling from his form. Well, yeah. Fiona looked up as if this should be obvious. Persistence hunters, tool users, pack coordinators. We didn't develop claws and fangs because we didn't need to. We developed teamwork and problem-solving instead. The second cub had been watching this entire interaction with the focused attention of a creature learning something new. Now it approached, moving with the same cautious curiosity as its sibling. It stopped just outside the first cub's space and sat down, clearly wanting to investigate but respecting the established hierarchy. "And you want some attention too, don't you?" Fiona said to the second cub, extending her other hand. The creature practically vibrated with excitement, scooting forward to sniff her offered fingers before giving them the same thorough licking treatment. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Chinthva muttered, his antennae twitching so rapidly they were becoming a blur. "In all recorded history, Velthar have never shown anything approaching social bonding with non-Velthar species." "That's because nobody's ever tried talking to them properly," Fiona said, now with two massive predator cubs leaning against her chair like oversized, deadly puppies. "Look, they're pack hunters, right? That means they have complex social structures, communication systems, hierarchy recognition. They're not just killing machines, they're intelligent killing machines." The third and smallest cub had been conducting its own investigation during this exchange, but now it too was drawn toward the unprecedented scene of interspecies bonding happening in the corner. It approached more boldly than its siblings, clearly the risk-taker of the group. "And here comes trouble," Fiona grinned, watching the youngest cub bound over with unrestrained enthusiasm. This one didn't stop to sit politely like its siblings. It went straight for Fiona's boots, sniffing them thoroughly before doing something that made everyone in the room question their understanding of physics. It flopped onto its back, exposing its belly, and began making what could only be described as happy gurgling noises. "Oh, you're definitely the baby of the family," Fiona laughed, reaching down to rub the creature's exposed stomach. "Look at you. Just a big softy, aren't you?" The sight of a human casually giving belly rubs to a creature that could disembowel a battle tank was apparently too much for several students. Fen made a sound like a deflating balloon. Jill dispersed so completely that she was barely visible. Mock's legs gave out entirely, and he slid down the wall to sit on the floor in stunned silence. "Students," Professor Helnix managed to chime, though their crystalline form was flickering so rapidly they resembled a malfunctioning hologram. "Are you observing this? Because I'm not entirely certain we should be observing this, or that it's actually happening." "Oh, it's happening," Fiona said cheerfully, now completely surrounded by three enormous predators who were acting like they'd found their long-lost favorite aunt. "The question is, what are you going to put in your research notes?" The silence that followed Fiona's question stretched on for exactly 18 seconds, during which time the smallest cub managed to work itself into such a state of bliss from the belly rubs that it began making a sound suspiciously similar to purring. If purring could rattle windows and make your bones vibrate in uncomfortable ways. Dr. Chinthva was the first to break. His compound eyes were darting between Fiona and the cubs so rapidly that his entire head was starting to blur. My research notes are going to read like complete fiction. No one will believe this." "Then maybe," Fiona suggested, pausing in her belly-rubbing duties to look around the room. "You should start by asking better questions." "Better questions," Professor Helnix chimed, their crystalline form finally stabilizing enough to be properly visible again. What questions could possibly explain this? "Well, for starters," Fiona said, giving the middle cub's ears another scratch that made its eyes roll back in apparent ecstasy, "you might want to ask why you assumed Velthar cubs wouldn't respond to proper socialization cues." "Because they're apex predators from a death world," Mock protested from his position on the floor, finally managing to work up the courage to speak. "They're supposed to attack everything that moves." "Says who?" Fiona asked mildly. The question hung in the air like a particularly awkward cloud of toxic gas. Says the literature," Grix managed, still clinging to his wall-mounted position despite the fact that all three cubs were now clearly more interested in getting pets than hunting anyone. "Says centuries of research and observation." "Research and observation conducted by whom?" Fiona pressed, now running her hands through the largest cub's fur with practiced ease. "And from what distance? And with what preconceptions?" Professor Helnix's form flickered thoughtfully. "Well, naturally, all studies have been conducted from safe distances, using remote sensors and there's your first problem," Fiona said, like a teacher walking students through a particularly obvious equation. "You can't understand pack behavior from a distance. Pack dynamics are all about close contact, scent exchange, body language, vocalization patterns. You've been studying them like they're, I don't know, like they're geological formations instead of social creatures." The largest cub chose that moment to demonstrate her point by nuzzling against her shoulder with enough force to knock over a small building, making happy rumbling sounds that definitely weren't in any of the research papers. "But surely," Dr. Kinthva's mandibles clicked uncertainly, "surely there must be some biological imperative that prevents interspecies bonding. Some evolutionary mechanism that—" "Why would there be?" Fiona interrupted, now with all three cubs arranged around her chair like the world's most dangerous honor guard. "Pack hunters are successful because they're adaptable. Flexible thinking, ability to recognize new pack members, willingness to adjust hierarchies based on competence rather than just species. It's not a bug, it's a feature." She paused to fish something out of her bag, and the cub's attention immediately focused on her movements with laser intensity. Several students made small sounds of alarm. "Relax," Fiona said, producing what appeared to be some kind of dried meat strips. "I brought snacks." The effect was immediate and dramatic. All three cubs sat at attention with a precision that would have impressed a military drill instructor, their eyes fixed on the treats with the kind of focus usually reserved for matters of life and death. "How did you know to bring food?" Fen whispered from the ceiling, her throat sac inflating slightly with what might have been awe. "Because I read the lesson plan," Fiona said, like this was the most obvious thing in the universe. "When someone says they're bringing juvenile predators to class, you bring snacks. Basic animal handling." She held up one of the strips, and the cub's synchronized head movements tracking it looked like some kind of hypnotic pendulum demonstration. "Velthar cubs," she said, her voice taking on a slightly different tone that somehow commanded immediate attention. "Sit." They sat. All three of them. Instantly. The classroom's collective intake of breath was audible. "Good boys," Fiona praised, tossing each cub a treat, which they caught with reflexes that defied physics. "Now, who wants to learn about proper pack integration?" What followed was perhaps the most surreal educational experience in the history of the Universal Institute. Fiona, apparently drawing from a lifetime of experience that nobody had bothered to ask about, began demonstrating concepts that turned established xenobiology on its head. See, the key thing about pack hierarchy, she explained, having somehow convinced the largest cub to roll over and expose its belly, is that it's not about size or strength. It's about competence and confidence. Alpha behavior isn't about domination. It's about taking responsibility. She rubbed the massive creature's stomach while it made contented gurgling noises that rattled the windows. "Watch his body language," she continued, addressing her stunned audience. "Ears forward, breathing steady, muscles relaxed. He's not submitting out of fear. He's showing trust. There's a difference." "But how do you know all this?" Vulca managed to ask, his rocky form slowly pulling itself back together from the stress fractures. Fiona looked up from her belly-rubbing duties with surprise. "Oh, right. I never mentioned. I grew up on Kepler Station." The effect of this casual revelation was electric. Every student who wasn't already pressed against a wall suddenly found themselves with an urgent need to be pressed against a wall. "Kepler Station," Jill whispered, her gaseous form rippling with shock. "The frontier colony. The one surrounded by—" "Hostile alien wildlife, yeah," Fiona nodded cheerfully. "My family runs a xenobiology research station there. We've been studying and, more importantly, living alongside indigenous predator species for about 15 cycles now." "Living alongside them?" Dr. Chinthava's voice had climbed several octaves. "You mean observing them from fortified positions?" "Well, sure, at first," Fiona shrugged, "but you can't really understand pack dynamics from behind barriers. Eventually, you have to make contact, establish trust, prove you're not a threat." She paused in her explanation to address the middle cub, who was trying to steal one of his siblings' treats. "Hey, no, we don't steal from pack members." The cub immediately backed off, ears slightly drooped in what was clearly embarrassment. "Now, as I was saying," Fiona continued, "Kepler Station has about 8 different species of pack hunters in the immediate area. Shadow stalkers, crystal wolves, the big sailing predators from the northern continent. You learn pretty quickly that aggression just escalates situations. But respect, confidence, understanding of pack dynamics, that gets you invited to the table instead of becoming what's on it." "You've been invited to pack activities by multiple species of alien predators?" Professor Hellnix's form was flickering so rapidly they were practically strobing. "Oh, sure," Fiona said, now apparently conducting some kind of ear examination on the smallest cub, who was loving every second of it. "The Shadow Stalkers actually brought me a kill gift last season. Massive thing, probably weighed twice what I do. Couldn't eat it, obviously, wrong biochemistry, but it was the thought that counted." The room fell silent, except for the happy rumbling of 3 extremely content Velthar cubs. "Fiona," Mock said slowly, his reptilian brain struggling to process this information, "are you telling us that your solution to encountering dangerous predators is to befriend them?" "Well, not all of them," Fiona said reasonably. "Some species are genuinely antisocial. The tunnel borers, for instance, they're just aggressive by nature. But pack hunters? Social predators? Yeah, befriending them is usually the safest option. Plus, once you're part of the pack, you've got backup if something actually dangerous shows up." She scratched behind the largest cub's ears, and it leaned into the touch with enough force to push her chair back several inches. "Besides," she added with a grin that was definitely predatory, "humans are persistence hunters. We don't chase prey until we catch it. We chase prey until it gives up. And we don't hunt alone, we hunt in coordinated groups with tools and strategy. From a pack predator's perspective, we're just another kind of pack predator. One with really good problem-solving skills and opposable thumbs. The smallest cub chose that moment to demonstrate just how thoroughly he'd accepted Fiona into the pack by curling up against her boots and going to sleep, purring like a furry earthquake. "And that," Fiona said, looking around the room at the collection of terrified alien faces, "is how you handle apex predators. Any questions?" The transformation in the classroom was nothing short of revolutionary. Where moments before there had been abject terror and chaos, now there was something far more unsettling for the alien students. Intense scientific curiosity mixed with a healthy dose of existential dread. Dr. Kalmesh's compound eyes had stopped their frantic darting and had settled into what could only be described as academic fascination. His mandibles clicked in the rhythmic pattern his species used for deep contemplation, occasionally pausing to make rapid notes on his datapad. "Miss Hamilton?" Professor Nexquo chimed, their crystalline form now stable and focused. "Would you mind elaborating on this concept of pack dynamics as it applies to interspecies communication?" Fiona looked up from where she was absently braiding what appeared to be friendship bracelets from the smallest cub's fur. "Oh, sure. It's pretty straightforward once you understand that intelligence creates more complex pack structures, not simpler ones." She gestured to the three cubs, who were now arranged around her in a perfect protective formation. "See, most people assume that high intelligence means moving away from pack behavior. But it's actually the opposite. The smarter a species is, the more sophisticated their social coordination becomes." Mock had finally worked up the courage to approach, though he maintained a respectful distance from the cubs. "But humans don't have pack structures. You have, what do you call them? Families? Cities?" "Same thing," Fiona shrugged. "Just scaled up. Family units, extended clans, tribal groups, nations, species alliances. It's all pack behavior, just with more complex hierarchies and specialized roles." She paused to prevent the middle cub from chewing on the leg of her chair. "The difference is that humans developed tool use and abstract thinking, which meant our pack coordination could extend beyond direct physical presence. We can have pack loyalty to individuals we've never met, coordinate with groups on the other side of the planet, even form emotional bonds with fictional characters." Vulca's rocky form had mostly reformed, though stress fractures still showed around his edges. "Are you suggesting that human social behavior is essentially advanced predator-pack coordination?" "I'm not suggesting it," Fiona said with amusement. "I'm stating it as fact. Humans are persistence hunters who developed abstract thinking and tool use. Everything else about our psychology flows from that foundation." The largest cub made a soft whuffling sound and rested his massive head on her shoulder. She absently scratched his ears while continuing her explanation. "See, most species develop either individual survival strategies or simple group tactics. But humans developed metasocial behavior. We don't just form packs, we form packs of packs. We don't just use tools, we make tools to make tools. We don't just communicate. We create shared fictional realities that help coordinate the behavior of millions of individuals we've never met." Professor Nexquo's form flickered with what their species expressed as profound realization. This explains the human diplomatic protocols. The emphasis on narrative structure, shared cultural references, abstract ethical frameworks. "Right," Fiona nodded. "When you're dealing with humans, you're not just dealing with individuals or even simple group dynamics. You're dealing with a species that thinks in terms of interconnected story-based hierarchies. Every human is simultaneously part of multiple pack structures: family, profession, belief systems, entertainment preferences, regional identity, species loyalty. She paused to fish another treat out of her bag, making all three cubs immediately snap to attention. And here's the really important part. Humans instinctively treat friendly individuals from other species as potential pack members. It's not a conscious decision. It's automatic pattern recognition. That's actually terrifying, Fen whispered from the ceiling, her throat sac inflating with what might have been awe or horror. Is it, though? Fiona asked, tossing treats to each cub in turn. I mean, think about it from a galactic politics perspective. You've got a species that automatically tries to integrate other species into cooperative social structures. That's pretty useful for building alliances. Dr. Kalmesh's antennae were practically vibrating with excitement. The implications for xenosociology are staggering. We've been approaching human behavior as if it were analogous to our own species' social patterns, but it's actually something entirely unprecedented. Well, not entirely unprecedented, Fiona said thoughtfully, scratching the smallest cub under the chin in a way that made him purr like a small earthquake. These guys do something similar, just not as abstract. Pack hunters who can recognize potential pack members across species lines and adapt their social structures to include them. She looked around the room at her classmates, most of whom were still pressed against walls, but now watching with fascination rather than pure terror. The thing is, most species develop social behaviors that work well for their specific environmental and biological requirements. Humans developed social behaviors that work well for coordinating flexible responses to novel situations, which is why we tend to be pretty good at figuring out how to get along with species we've never encountered before. Get along with them by befriending their apex predators? Grix asked, his multiple limbs uncurling slightly, as the cubs showed no interest in him whatsoever. Among other strategies, yeah, Fiona grinned. Though I should probably mention that what you're seeing here isn't actually that unusual. This is pretty much how I spend most afternoons. The silence that followed this casual statement could have been measured in geological epochs. I'm sorry, Professor Nexaquo chimed carefully. Did you just say this is how you normally spend your time? Well, sure, Fiona said, pulling up images on her datapad. I mean, the cubs back home are a bit bigger than these guys, and there are usually more of them, but the principle is the same. She showed the screen to the nearest students, causing immediate and comprehensive panic. The images showed Fiona in various outdoor settings, surrounded by creatures that made the Velthar cubs look like particularly cuddly house pets. There were pack hunters the size of small buildings, aerial predators with wingspans that defied physics, and what appeared to be some kind of crystalline spider thing that was using Fiona as a convenient perch. That's my research partner, Midnight, she said, pointing to what was clearly a creature from everyone else's nightmares. He's a shadow beast, apex predator from the deep forest regions, incredibly intelligent, excellent problem-solving skills, and he gives the best hugs. Jill dispersed so completely that she was basically just a faint shimmer in the air. Shadow beast, Mock repeated faintly. You have a pet shadow beast. Partner, Fiona corrected. Not pet. He's actually smarter than most sentient species, just not technologically inclined. We've been working together on territorial mapping and pack behavior studies for about 3 cycles now. Dr. Kalmesh's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. His compound eyes were fixed on the images, with the kind of intensity usually reserved for religious experiences or complete nervous breakdowns. "Miss Hamilton," he said slowly, "exactly how many apex predators are you currently partnered with?" Fiona considered this, absently preventing the middle cub from investigating Grix too closely. "Well, that depends on how you define partnered. If you mean individuals I work with directly, probably about 12. If you include pack associations and territory-sharing agreements, maybe 40 or 50. 40 or 50, Professor Nexquo repeated, their crystalline form beginning to flicker again. "Oh, but that's just on my home colony," Fiona added helpfully. "The research station has formal cooperation agreements with pack leaders representing probably 300 or 400 individuals across 8 different species." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the full implications of this sank in. "Fiona," Fen managed from the ceiling, "are you telling us that there's an entire human colony that's essentially formed a multi-species predator alliance?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of ominous," Fiona laughed. "But yeah, basically. Turns out when you treat apex predators like intelligent individuals with their own goals and social needs instead of just dangerous obstacles to avoid, they're pretty reasonable to work with." She showed another image on her datapad, this one of what appeared to be a formal gathering of creatures that belonged in a xenobiologist's nightmares, all sitting calmly around what was clearly a human settlement. "This was taken during the seasonal territory negotiation meeting last cycle," she explained. "We work out resource sharing, coordinate hunting schedules to avoid conflicts, establish protocols for interpack disputes. Standard diplomatic stuff." "Standard diplomatic stuff," Volka repeated, his voice cracking along with his rocky exterior. "The really interesting part," Fiona continued, apparently oblivious to the mounting horror around her, "is watching how the different species adapt their pack structures to include human organizational concepts. The shadow beasts, for instance, have started using abstract territorial markers and time-delayed coordination strategies. Really fascinating evolution of hunting behavior." Dr. Kalmesh finally found his voice. "Miss Hamilton, this represents a completely revolutionary approach to xenobiology. The research applications alone." "Oh, that reminds me," Fiona said brightly. "I've been meaning to suggest that the Academy consider a field study program. I mean, reading about pack behavior in textbooks is fine, but there's really no substitute for hands-on experience. Every student in the room felt their various circulatory systems pause simultaneously." "A field study program," Professor Nexquo chimed weakly. "Sure, I could arrange for the class to visit my colony next semester. Meet some of the research subjects in their natural environment, observe actual pack integration processes, maybe participate in a few cooperative hunting exercises." The largest cub chose that moment to stand up and stretch, reminding everyone present exactly how much muscle and claw was currently treating Fiona like a beloved pack leader. When he yawned, revealing teeth that could probably chew through hull plating, several students made small whimpering sounds. "Of course," Fiona continued, apparently not noticing the collective terror. "We'd start small. Maybe just introduce everyone to Midnight and a few of the calmer pack leaders. Work up to the more energetic species." "More energetic?" Mock squeaked. Fiona grinned with an expression that reminded everyone present that humans had their own set of predatory teeth. "Oh, you'd love the storm hunters. They're these incredible aerial pack hunters that coordinate lightning strikes during their hunts. Absolutely brilliant tactical thinking, and they have this amazing sense of humor once you get to know them." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Jill finally giving up and dispersing entirely. apparently having decided that corporeal existence was overrated. "So," Fiona said, looking around the room with bright enthusiasm, "who wants to sign up for the field study program?" The response was immediate and unanimous. Every single student in the classroom suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere and began a carefully controlled retreat toward the exits. Dr. Kalmesh and Professor Nexquo exchanged glances that somehow conveyed entire conferences' worth of academic discussion in a split second. "Miss Hamilton," Dr. Kalmesh said carefully, "perhaps we could discuss the logistics of such a program in my office later?" "Sure," Fiona agreed cheerfully, completely missing the fact that she was now alone in the classroom, except for the instructors and three enormous predators who were regarding her with the kind of devoted attention usually reserved for religious figures. "I should probably call home anyway and let Midnight know we might have visitors. He likes to prepare special welcome gifts for new pack members." As she gathered her belongings, the three cubs fell into formation around her, like an honor guard of living nightmares. She paused at the door and looked back at the two instructors, who were still standing in stunned silence. "Oh, and professors, you might want to update the course description. Theoretical xenobiology doesn't really cover what we did today." And with that, she strolled out of the classroom, followed by three apex predators who were clearly convinced they'd found their new favorite human, leaving behind two instructors who were questioning everything they thought they knew about the universe. Dr. Kalmesh finally broke the silence. I think we're going to need to call the dean." Professor Nexaquo's form flickered thoughtfully. "And possibly the Galactic Safety Commission. And maybe a therapist. Definitely a therapist." Outside in the corridor, they could hear Fiona's cheerful voice greeting other students. "Oh, hi everyone. Don't mind the cubs. They're just coming to lunch with me. Who wants to meet some real predators?" The sound of rapidly retreating footsteps echoed through the halls of the Universal Institute, and somewhere in the distance, what sounded suspiciously like a purring earthquake was making its way toward the cafeteria. It was, all things considered, a fairly typical day in advanced xenobiology.